My HR people were the people that kept me safe from breaking rules or trying to do things outside of structures, even though sometimes it was important to be able to think that way. But they also, when you have a great HR person, they are also brilliant enablers. So when something makes sense for the business and you're partnering with someone who has got your back, but also sees the big business picture, they are absolute enablers.
Here's a pre-show scenario for you. Imagine you had to visit 16 houses just to cook your dinner. One place has the pots and pans, one has the stove, another has the food. You get the idea. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, the reality is most global businesses operate the same way, using 16 different tools to hire, pay, manage, and develop their workforce. But now, the platform that does it all, Deel. That's Deel. Deel is your forever people platform built for global payroll and HR. So whether you're an enterprise business, a small company, or something in between, Deel works for your entire team. So are you ready to transform your global payroll and HR processes? If you are, click the link in the show notes to book a demo with Deel today. That's Deel. Hello and welcome back to the HR L&D Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Nick Day. I'm CEO at JGA Recruitment Group. We are specialist HR recruiters with offices in the UK, the Europe, and now the US as well. Now on this show, if you're not familiar with it, we explore the world of HR and learning and development. I speak with inspiring leaders who are driving change, pushing boundaries, and shaping the future of work. So whether you're a seasoned HR professional or whether you are just starting out, this is the place where you're going to gain insights, advice, and inspiration to help you excel in your career. And today, I am bringing you a true leader. I'm bringing you a guest today called Kirsteen Williamson-Guinn. Now, she is the founder of Elevate Women. There will be a link in the show notes if you want to find out more and you enjoy the content of today's episode. And she's also the author of Unshakable Confidence, Your Blueprint. This is a book that has just been released. So if you enjoy this episode, go and grab yourself a copy. It is a brilliant book. It's selling really well. And I'm sure Kirsteen will bring us up to speed with that during the course of this episode as well. But suffice to say, she is really passionate about helping women successfully transition back into work. She's really passionate about helping rebuild confidence, overcome challenges like imposter syndrome. As someone who works as an executive coach myself, I know that imposter syndrome is something that not just women actually, a lot of people really, really struggle with. So I think it's really important to learn some strategies today from you, Kirsteen, about how we can really empower ourselves, not just find our place in the workforce again, but to help us thrive as confident leaders. So without further ado, welcome Kirsteen Williamson-Gwynn to the HR L&D Podcast. How are you feeling?
I'm all good. Thank you for having me, Nick. I'm excited about our conversation today.
I'm excited too. And timing couldn't be better because when we booked this in, your book wasn't live and now it's out there. It's in Amazon. It's flying off the shelves. So the timing is absolutely perfect. Before we get into that, though, let me ask you a question. I ask all of my guests. What do the words human resources mean to you?
This is an interesting question. And I've thought about this and I've decided to give you my honest gut response to the question, which takes me back to when I was in my career as a director in financial services. My HR people were the people that kept me safe from breaking rules or trying to do things outside of structures, even though sometimes it was important to be able to think that way. But they also, when you have a great HR person, they are also brilliant enablers. So when something makes sense for the business and you're partnering with someone who has got your back, but also sees the big business picture, they are absolute enablers. So that when I think about HR, human resources, I think back to those days when I had so many people challenges, trying to navigate my way through some of those in the most commercial and people-focused ways, not necessarily, focused on procedure, let's say. They kept me in the right place.
I think that's quite nice because actually you gave a really good example as well of how we've really evolved from HR into the world of people management. It's all about people. Although I'm quite interested to hear more about the rule breaker, Kirsteen, as well. There's obviously something in there. They always brought me back in line. And whether you want to share some of those, that rule breaking, please do. But one thing I'm really interested to know as well is with everything what you've just said, how does HR then really play a crucial role in supporting women returning to work? You obviously women yourself, someone that, as you said, likes to break rules. What do you think HR's role should be in that relationship?
So I think HR are people, and sometimes my biggest frustration about HR in a business is that some leaders see them as people that they have to work around, whereas my experience of HR are people that want to do right by people, but also have a very commercial focus, and I think that's massively important. And HR don't just advocate for women. I think HR are looking after the interests of the people aligned with a business objective. And, that's massively important. And sometimes as a leader immersed in their own business, you can become a little bit narrow, maybe, with your focus. And so having a great HR person by your side allows you just to expand your thinking a little bit, let's say. I don't want you to get the wrong idea about me breaking rules. My approach with HR was always, this is what needs to happen, help me find a way. Because, if you look at policy, sometimes it's very black and white, yet sometimes the right thing for the people and the business is a little bit, grey.
Well, look, it's often the rule breakers that change the world, right? Sometimes we need to challenge, and I think that's important. And I think, let's take this into the world of work. Then I mentioned imposter syndrome in my introduction. Sometimes people don't have the confidence to challenge. It can be very, nerve-wracking to challenge something we don't necessarily agree with. So, what have you learned in your journey about confidence, particularly in the workplace?
Yeah, there's so much to say about confidence. And the most interesting thing about imposter, I hate the title imposter syndrome for a start, because I don't like syndromes. But most of us at some point will feel like an imposter, especially if we are growing and stepping up in some way in our life or our career. It's normal. What I found really interesting was when I left my corporate career, the first person in my inbox was a male peer saying he felt like an imposter and he needed support. And that was a bit of a surprise for me, because although I knew it's not necessarily a female thing, it's not. I didn't expect to see some of my peers coming forward. And to your question around, what are the challenges with people speaking up? I think the environment is crucial, and I think post-COVID virtual world creates more challenge for people speaking up, because I don't know about you, but if you're on a conference call for multiple hours in the day, it can become more of a challenge to actually challenge and speak up, because you're not physically in the room, so you're actually less likely to do that. As far as the work that I do with women is concerned, a lot of the time we don't speak up because we're not giving ourselves a second to think about what it is we actually want to say. We also doubt ourselves more than most. So studies show women underestimate themselves. We underestimate ourselves as women. And we also do a lot of overthinking, and we also have this drive for perfectionism more so than men. And so all of that can create a bit of hesitation when it comes to, should we actually speak up? How is this going to be seen? And we worry about how we're going to be judged. And so when it comes to managing our career and exposure, which is a really key part of managing our career, if we're not focused, prepared, and confident, then we're not going to be able to put ourselves forward. And this kind of links back to the main things that I see when it comes to women managing their career, which is we're often really disconnected from ourselves and from what it is we want to create in our lives or our career. And that's often because we are running from one thing to the next. We're juggling multiple plates. Lots of us are, not just women, but
Sure.
a lot of women take on more of the care. So we become so disconnected from ourselves that we don't even know where we're going or what we're doing. We don't give ourselves the second to breathe, gather our thoughts, so that when it comes to speaking up, we can actually do that confidently and clearly. I think that links to Harvey Coleman's career success pie. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I'm not familiar with it. No.
Okay, so pie being performance, image, and exposure. Now, when you look at the percentages, the percentage allocation for success in a career, women tend to spend a lot of time in performance. So we are more likely to overwork. We're more likely to take on stretch projects and do things that maybe other people don't want to do. And these are sweeping generalizations, but there are studies that also show this stuff. So performance is actually only 10% of the success elements. So image and exposure, image is 30% and exposure is 60%. So for us women, we tend to spend a lot of time in performance, which means we're not managing our brand or our image, and we're not creating opportunities for us to step up. So my mission is to help women speak up, step up, and stand out in their career. And I do that through helping them build this relationship with themselves so that they have that core confidence to be able to do things, to whatever it is they want to do, even if it might not go to plan, which is another thing that can riddle us. If we're worrying about things not going to plan, things not being perfect, that stops us from putting ourselves forward.
It's interesting. Well, obviously, I can never speak from a position of how it would feel and as a woman, because I'm a man here. But I do know from a coaching side of things, there is, without making it gender specific, there's a lot of people that suffer with imposter syndrome in the workplace, male, female, or however you want to define yourself. I think something that I find interesting from my coaching relationships, I think often it's because we're always told in coaching we've got to look forward. It's all about the future, but we can live in the future sometimes, and we're already assuming how people will react to a certain circumstance, how people are going to perceive us before we've actually done the thing. So that builds anxiety. And often I find people don't spend enough time focusing on the things that got them to where they are in the first place. And we don't do enough reflective work. That opportunity to say, actually, I do deserve to be here because of X, Y, and Z. We go straight into the place of judgment. And I was speaking to a newly qualified coach recently that I was supporting. And they said, Nick, I don't know how I'm going to charge X, Y, and Z to work with clients or how I'm going to find them. And I've only just passed my coaching. And there's so many coaches out there. Like, why would they pick me? And actually, funny enough, it was a female, although I don't necessarily know if that makes a difference in this context. You may correct me if it does. But I said, no, you've been coaching for the last 15 years of your career. Yeah. What you're going to bring to the table is that 15 years of experience working in leadership positions. You're coaching every single day. Coaching is a new word for me that used to be called leadership. And you need to bring all the expertise that you've been dealing with in the last 15 years to the table and not worry about the fact you only qualified a month ago. That's the qualification bit at the end, and how you put all of the things you've discovered over the last 15 years into a process of understanding and helping others. But when was the last time you looked back? Like with coaching, sometimes it's so far about looking in front of ourselves, we forget to celebrate all the mini successes we've had along the way. Now, for me, that's not gender specific. I work with male clients that have been similar. But I'm in agreement with you about imposter syndrome. I think it's a term that's also overused. I think sometimes we're not imposters. We just haven't taken that time to reflect on why we are where we are. And, it's a great phrase. I think something, wherever you go, here I am. And it's just sometimes thinking that way round a little bit. But what's your understanding of what imposter syndrome is? Because people do define it differently. I'd love to get your understanding, for those listening, of how you would define imposter syndrome.
It's this feeling that someone's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, you shouldn't be here. There was a mistake. You're not in the right place. So and that is all linked to self-concept, which is how you see yourself, how you see your potential. So the thing about confidence, going back to your initial question, and this is linked to the imposter feelings, is that confidence is not a fixed trait. So, and sometimes we believe that it is. We think, oh, they're a confident person. I bet they don't ever feel like an imposter. There's no such thing. And the thing that I always remember my coach saying to me years ago was, another level, another devil. You have to get comfortable with the fact that whenever you step up, you're going to experience some doubt because you're human. You're going somewhere you haven't been before. And so the chances are you're going to feel like maybe you can't do it, or you don't know how to do it. It's going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel stretched. You might feel like you shouldn't be there, the imposter feeling. But if you can get your head around the fact that this is normal, this is part of your growth, and just almost, I mean, I hear people talking about naming that devil and talking to it and saying, I knew you were coming, but you're not welcome, so you can go now. I've got this. It's that type of thing. So for me, feeling like an imposter is just this feeling that maybe I shouldn't be here. I'm not good enough to be here. Something went wrong, and someone's going to catch me out. And I remember years ago reading an article, this is years ago, about it basically said that 95% of CEOs experience feelings of imposter, and they are waiting for someone to tap them on the shoulder and say, this is all a big mistake, you shouldn't be here.
I would, a lot of that I think is often rooted in something that's happened before, where someone somewhere along our career trajectory or journey has told us we're not good enough, and we sit on it, we don't deal with that, and it comes up a little bit later on. I think there's also the idea of, I think you called it I can't remember the exact phrase with the devil, but the idea that comparison is a thief of joy. We look at everybody else and we think, they're better than us, but of course that is just a dangerous way of thinking. And the devil for me is like, there's a parable about the good wolf and the bad wolf you may know about, where they say, which they're constantly fighting inside of us all. And if you want to know which one wins, it's whichever one you feed. So if you're feeding that bad wolf, it's going to beat the good wolf. So you've got to remember to feed the good wolf instead. And there's so many things out there that help us with this, but then knowing these things and obviously putting them into practice is much more difficult. Now, I know you've specialized particularly in helping women re-enter the workforce. Again, I know it's a really challenging time, because my wife has been through this process herself, and she became very anxious, and you feel like you've lost touch a little bit because you've been at home. For different women, obviously different circumstances, but in her case, been home for a long time, felt a little bit ostracized from everything that's going on. You feel like everything's moving around you and you're not quite moving forward. Tell us a little bit about the work you've been doing to really help women in particular, but it could be anybody, of course, re-enter the workforce if they had some time out.
And this is where it does get quite similar, because if you've been out of the business for a long time, it's very stressful. One, getting back in, and then two, when you return, because you feel like everything has changed. And you know how quick things can change, in a matter of months, let alone if you've been out for a long time. So the things that I generally do to start with is I always work on the person and what's going on for them before we even get to work. How are they taking care of themselves? What sort of working pattern do they want to be operating to? What boundaries are they putting in place so that they can take care of themselves and perform well in their role? A big thing is actually helping them to ask for what's going to support them to perform well. And what I've found, particularly with maternity returners, is by the time they come back to work, they almost feel like they're in debt to their company. And so they are less likely to ask for the flexibility, and we're only talking about tiny bits of flexibility, but they are less likely to ask for that because they feel like they're in debt and they need to get back and start, regaining their status. So all of the work I do is around inner work, so self-concept, relationship that you have with yourself, how you see yourself and your potential, and strategy to be able to get into whether it's a more senior position, a different career, or returning after a break, the strategy to get in and be able to perform well.
It's funny, hearing some of that brings back memories for me. I don't have many regrets, but one of mine is I didn't take paternity leave for either of my children. All right. But what's interesting is I had the same anxieties, but in complete reverse, because I did continue to work, but I had the anxiety of when my wife started work that I'd left it so long that actually my children had moved on almost like a workforce would. And how would I have that bond when my wife's had so much time with the children? How am I going to create that? And sometimes I would overcompensate. I'd try and get whatever it is, you kind of try and overcompensate. I would imagine the same probably happens in the other way around. You come into work, you put in more hours than maybe it's necessary. You're trying to create the bonds that you're worried may have broken. I don't think there's ever been a discussion I've heard about the other way around of that, because maybe it's not a workplace conversation, it's a parental one. But it's something that I really struggled with.
Yeah, well, it is the same. It's the overwork to make up for something. That's and it's not helpful. And that's why if you can help people actually get the clarity on what's going to support them to get back into work and thrive, because let's face it, business needs them to thrive, and then have the confidence to actually ask clearly for what it is that they want. And often it's not even a lack of confidence, it is a lack of clarity. So just being able to talk that through and getting clear on what's going to support someone helps massively. But the particularly maternity returners, it's so important that these people are taken care of, because they will leave and go somewhere else often, rather than asking for simple things that would have helped them do well.
I have a sensitive question I'd like to ask, and something who's been through this and seen it firsthand with my partner. And I'll never understand, because I'll never walk in my wife's shoes or women's shoes, but it's not talked about enough, and that's the menopause. And I know that menopausal symptoms, there are, I think it's last time I did some research, there's over 70 different symptoms. It impacts every woman differently. I know in my own personal experience of working with my wife, and I she's okay me mentioning this, is it really did impact her confidence and her belief in herself and different things that were coming up. And, we know that the hormone levels, it can be in different places. And there's so many different symptoms that it can impact everyone individually and differently. I think there's two parts to my question here. One is, if you're a woman that's going through that, what's the best way to navigate that in the workplace? Because it could impact performance, it could impact confidence levels and some of the things we've discussed. And the second question would be, as an employer, certainly as a male employer here, what's the best way for me to create a very safe environment for women to feel comfortable in expressing how they're feeling, or making sure that I've got the right things in place to be as supportive as I possibly can be?
Oh, that's a nice, simple double question you've just asked me.
I know this isn't scripted. I'm thinking out loud, and I think there are two deliberate parts to it. And I think there are two perspectives here, because we want to make sure if a woman feels comfortable raising it, we also have an employer that knows how to deal with that request. So I think that's why. Hello, HR and people leaders. Are you exhausted of the war for talent cliche? The problem is, when we hear a cliche, it usually exists for a reason. However, we think it's time for a fresh approach to the talent crisis. That's because at JGA Recruitment, we understand the real challenges you face in sourcing phenomenal HR and people candidates. And guess what? We think we have the solution. Our team is on a mission to revolutionize your hiring process. That's because we're not just recruiters, we're strategic partners dedicated to finding HR and people professionals who align perfectly with your company's vision and goals. So let's break the cycle of frustration together. Partner your talent acquisition strategies with JGA Recruitment and experience the difference in service, excellence, and results. No longer do you need to suffer the costs associated with a poor hire, because with over 100 five-star Google reviews and already trusted by many of the world's leading brands, why don't you take action today? Contact us at jjrecruitment.com to discover how we can help transform your HR and people teams. And here's a bonus. When you visit us, you can sign up for our weekly HR newsletter that's packed with invaluable industry insights and more. Let's revolutionize your HR talent acquisition strategies together and make the war for talent a cry from the past. Visit jjrecruitment.com to find out more.
Yeah. So I think what's been really great about menopause awareness over the last few years is it's become a big deal. And so many companies now are talking to experts and paying attention to how menopause presents itself at work and what that's like for the women. Because as someone who is in perimenopause, I can tell you it's not fun. And the other challenge is it's different for everyone, like you said. So it's really difficult to be able to. This is definitely not something you can box stick or do a one size fits all. So for women, I think the most important thing is that you trust your body and you pay attention and you do things that get you as calm as possible as much of the time as you can, because anxiety is one of the common symptoms. So if you can take care of that and pay attention to your body, you're going to be able to do something that's a bit more supportive for yourself. I hate to say this, but going to a doctor to talk about menopause is just not particularly helpful. So if you can go and find some of the menopause clinics and get some, specialist support, then that's also going to enable you to have better work conversations. From an employer's point of view, I'm internally conflicted about what you said, because when you said, what do men do? Should they be having conversations? Part of me is thinking yes, but then the other part of me is thinking no, because
From an HR perspective, it's difficult, right? And these are difficult conversations they are difficult to have. There's lack of. There was always going to be an element of a lack of understanding because it's something we've never gone through, and of course, it's so personal, which makes it even more challenging.
Yeah. So my take on that would be, it goes back to environment. There needs to be an environment where it's safe to raise things like this, and there is access to support, whatever that looks like. Not necessarily your over enthusiastic male leader who's just learnt, he's read 20 pages on the menopause. That's probably not helpful. But having proper support is helpful, and maybe having resources online on whatever platform is available, having some resources available. I mean, there's been so many documentaries as well. Having access to things like that where experts are talking is going to be more helpful. But the foundation of everything for people in organizations is culture and environment. If it's a safe environment and a culture where you are appreciated for raising things, you're going to raise it.
No, I think that's helpful. I mean, from my perspective, we created a menopausal committee internally, and it is female leaders within our business. So hopefully that made it easier for them to address. And that was the best approach I thought I could take to try to be sensitive. And having experienced it from my side, I know how much impact it can have and how important it is to make sure people feel supported. So sometimes it is difficult though to try and make sure we navigate that. You want to be supportive, as you say, but not come across like you've just read 20 pages and because that's also the wrong approach. So that was interesting for me to ask.
Not to weaponize it as well, because I think sometimes these things can be it can diminish, and I think as a female often that we would worry about, does this diminish my abilities right now because of it? So I'll just keep it to myself. and push through.
Well, let's hold that thought a moment then, because I know you've also done a lot of work in helping organizations to support women taking senior positions as well. Now, this isn't menopausal specific, but I think there is, in terms of the weaponization of people being scared about certain disclosures that can sometimes impact. And I know it can be very difficult. There's still a big gender pay gap. There's still not enough female CEOs in the FTSE and things like that. While it's improving slowly. But you do a lot of work with senior women in the workplace. I wonder if you can give us some advice about what organizations can do, policies, frameworks, strategies, whatever it might be that can help senior women on that career journey.
So as far as helping the senior women, I think it's about understanding that they are probably going to have slightly different needs. And there's a huge focus on D&I, and that is absolutely brilliant. But I still think that a lot of the leadership training is gender neutral, and there is a need, I believe, for women to have something slightly different when they're in senior positions, to enable them to juggle all those plates, to take into account the things that impact them that don't impact men. For example, there's studies that show competent and confident women are less likable. And so if you're trying to negotiate or get a new role and you are coming across as someone who is very confident and competent, but you are not warm, then the chances are that's not going to go well for you. And that is
not... a quick question? Sorry to interject. I'm just trying to make sure that we're giving balance here as well.
Yeah.
Because I would argue that would that not be the same for regardless of gender? If you come across overconfident, you don't tend to come across warm. Or is this because there is too many men in senior positions that feel threatened, and that's why it's not a good trait? Or is it just because they don't feel warm?
So I'm not talking about overconfidence, and I agree with you about balance totally. However, when it comes to self-estimated intelligence, men overestimate and women underestimate. And then for women, if you are not coming across as confident and competent, you will be disregarded, not seen as someone who's as capable as a man. But if you're not likable, and this is particularly irrelevant for a man, I'm not talking about overconfidence, I'm talking about confident and competent. If you are a man and you are confident...
I think I'm asking you a different question. Mm-hmm. I guess it's the person that's making the assumption. So is this because we have predominantly male people making those assessments and we haven't got enough diversity in the people making those decisions on the people interviewing? Is that where this sits? Or is it irrespective? If you've got a gender balance and diverse panel that are interviewing this individual, they'll all come up with the same kind of response that actually that's not what we want and it's different.
So this is, if you put assessments and interviews to one side, this is about, there's the male hubris, female humility study, which shows this difference in how people perceive themselves. And there is a difference based on gender. What that translates to in a work environment is that a man will put themselves forward more than a woman. So that's the sort of stuff that has to be tackled. Linked to the other study around, and I've seen this and I've been there, when I've been very focused and what you could say was confident and competent, I've been told to put a smile on my face. Now, if you had been sat next to me being very focused and confident and competent and doing a great job, you would not have been told to put a smile on your face. I would put money on it.
I still don't think we're getting everything you've said. These are statistical studies. I'm not in disagreement with anything you've said. I want to make that clear. But it's who are we talking about who's making that comment? Is it you're saying that a male would make that comment or a female would make that comment on the individual? So you and I sat next to each other. Are we talking about what a man would say, put a smile on your face? Or is this gender neutral? I don't understand that bit.
That bit is gender neutral. So a woman will feel the same as a man about a confident and competent woman. Because
so in your experience, that could have been a woman that said to you, put a smile on your face, as easy as it could have been a man. That's the bit I was trying to understand, is how it's being interpreted by the people because I think there is an issue in the workplace, full disclosure, where there's not enough diversity in the panels that are making the decisions on whether people should get certain positions. They're often male dominated panels. There's not enough diversity, ethnicity, or gender balance in those panels. So I would understand those results. I was just understanding that who would make that comment about the smile on the face. Could it be anybody?
Yes.
Or is it a male person saying it?
No,
I guess
it could be
anybody.
This is the thing. So what companies need to do is make people aware of these types of issues, have more women in talent pools, and particularly the level beneath VP and director, because often there's a lot of focus on VP and director level females. But the thing is that you've got, I think the last time I read something, it was 2 female directors are leaving for every one coming in. That was in Forbes in May this year, I believe. So if you're not getting that talent pool at the level beneath VP and director, you're never going to solve the problem. And then you've got to figure out how to keep these people here, because they're leaving for a variety of reasons.
I think it's interesting. I mean, I was just keen to understand from a recruitment perspective, and I guess I'm in a fortunate position that the industries that I specialize in, payroll and HR, that there's a really good proportion of women in those industries. So I know, and certainly in other industries, particularly in STEM industries, it's really, really difficult, and I imagine these are probably exacerbated much more so. What are some of the things that you would know then in your leadership days? You mentioned, earlier that someone said to you when you were focused, put a smile on your face, that you maybe wish you'd known early on in your career that would have maybe helped fast track your journey? Or is there anything that maybe someone is at the start of their journey now that, with the knowledge you have, with the beauty of hindsight, where we always have 20/20 vision when we look back, that you would give advice to them or to yourself?
I wish I'd started working on myself earlier. And what I mean is the work on myself concept, because I was in a very male dominated world, and my success was built on male energy, which meant I was pushing and I was drained. There's also this element that we talked about right at the beginning, was this feeling of not being good enough. So I was quite a young director at the time, and I saw all these people around me with amazing academic backgrounds. I felt like I wasn't smart enough to be there, so I did a degree at 40. I didn't need to do a degree at 40, but I did it to try and convince myself I was actually quite smart, even though I'd been a director for 5 years with great ratings. If I could go back in time, I'd do that work on myself instead of having, all these career plans. Because if you don't have the inner work right, you can have the best plan in the world, but it's going to be really heavy to implement and execute.
Yeah, we see this. I know you work as a coach as well. Often that people have the idea of, when I do this, then I'll be good enough. When I do this, then I'll be good enough. I won't start my first business until I've done it, because then I'll be good. And a degree is a great example of that, right? We're not quite validating our experience to that point. So when I've done a degree, then I'll be good enough. And I had the same, by the way. I felt like I couldn't start writing or publicizing anything online until I had a PhD. How mad is that? Like I've got 2 MAs. That wasn't enough for me, because all the books I love to read are written by doctors. So I have to do that as well. And funnily enough, it's what brought me into my coaching journey. I spoke to Trayton Vance, who's CEO of Coaching Focus, and I was about to enroll on the PhD course, and he said, "You're crazy. Your problem isn't the qualification." And luckily, he was a skilled coach. And I was on this show in private notes. I had an interview with him on this show, and go back and find the episode. We were talking offline, and he literally coached me for 10 minutes and went, "That's not the thing that you need. I'm not saying I won't help you, but the reason you're doing it is for the wrong reasons. It's because you don't feel good enough." And so I can totally understand And well done, by the way, going back at 40 and getting that degree. I think my mum did a degree at 40 as well. But it's interesting where that comes from, the place inside us that comes from. It's not really for the learning, it's for that self acknowledgement that we're good enough. And I think that's really interesting. Question I haven't asked you, and I have no experience with this, and I couldn't. But of course, there are businesses changing, and there are all-female companies as well. So for those working in all-female departments, organizations, whatever it might be, do the dynamics shift? Are there different types of skills or different ways that we need to communicate to thrive in all-female environments? I don't think that's a question I've ever asked someone before, and I'm wondering if the dynamics change.
Definitely they change. I wouldn't recommend it. In all honesty, I'm always about diversity, and I mean diversity in every sense. One of the hardest teams I worked in was a rural, very white female team. It was not fun. So yes, the dynamic shift. Is it a good thing? It's probably as unhelpful as having an entire male workforce. You're missing a lot. Whether
interesting. I'm glad I asked the question.
I wouldn't recommend that.
I want to ask some questions about your wonderful book, Unshakable Confidence. Okay. Before I get there, though, there's a lot of HR directors and people that are responsible for creating safe workspaces that listen to this show. So I wonder what would be your 3 or 5, or whatever number you want to pick. It doesn't matter. I don't want to exclude anything that might be really important. So I'll let you decide how many points you want to raise. But for creating a psychologically safe space at work, what are the kind of key strategies you'd recommend an HR director or someone that's responsible for creating that safe space took on board to hopefully really move the needle to make it as psychologically safe as we can be, so that we can be ourselves, we can hopefully feel confident of raising issues in a safe space?
Oh, that's such a big question. How do you be yourself? And the reason that I'm mulling this over in my head is because authentic leadership, 2 words that come up everywhere, but what does it really mean? And my challenge on authentic leadership is it's really hard to be authentic if you don't know who you are. And I felt like that for a long time. How do we create an inclusive business? I think the most important thing is create platforms for people to share, speak, and listen. And I sometimes think that is having a meeting without an agenda and just listening to people, it's invaluable, because when there's no agenda, you're going to get to the crux of whatever's going on. So definitely, how do you bring groups of people together so that you can actually hear the reality of what's going on? I think how things look at the top sets the tone. So you've got to walk the talk. If you talk about inclusivity and you've got an entire female leadership team, as if, then you can't encourage people to be inclusive, because you're not. So your word and your behaviors and your values are on display, and they need to sing that tune. If they don't, you can train values and behaviors into everyone as much as you want, but if you're not doing it, they won't. And I
agree with you.
The other thing I would say is how leadership respond is everything. When things go wrong, when there's challenges, when people do speak up and it's not well received, all of these things set the tone.
I was on a podcast, a brilliant podcast called the Maverick Paradox podcast recently, run by a great friend of mine called Judith Germain. And she does Maverick Leadership. And we had an interesting debate, actually. And she was saying, asked me the question of, do you think we should be able to bring our true selves, our authentic selves to work every single day? Well, I asked her, I said, we need more, for me, so this is definitely a personal view, there needs to be more confirmation of what that actually means, because I have many identities. I've got Nick the parent, I've got Nick the triathlete, I've got Nick the, and actually I don't always want to bring, there's the flamboyant side of me as well, that actually I choose not to bring to work. And the argument coming back was, but if you felt like you were comfortable, you wouldn't mind making that choice. You could just bring it in. I said, no, but it's actually because sometimes I share parts of me only with certain people, and that's a deliberate choice. Not because I lack the confidence necessarily, but there's some parts of me I like to save for certain individuals. And it was interesting because I asked it as a boss, there are bits of me that go, actually, I'm not sure I want my workforce turning up necessarily in Bermuda shorts and sandals, when there is an industry element to what we do as well. And that might be how people want to be at home. So it's getting the balance from my perspective. I know not everyone will agree with me on this. I think there's a balance to be had about how much of our authentic selves we do bring into the workplace. But I'm aware that that's my view and not shared by everyone. I'd love to get your take on where this authenticity, I guess, line starts and finishes when we go from being at home, particularly now in the world of remote work, and the workplace. Should we be able to bring our full selves, flamboyance and all in? Or do you think there is a professional line that we need to be mindful of at the same time?
That's a great question. I tend to be where you're at on this. I think balance is everything, and I think we choose what we want people to see. We're doing that consciously all the time, and at work it's no different. Where I think it's been really helpful to have this authentic line is, when you're at home and you've got dogs, children, and things happen.
Absolutely.
If you go back maybe 5 years ago, if your dog had started barking when you're on a conference call, you'd be frowned upon. If your child had come into the room when you were on a Zoom, that wouldn't be acceptable. Whereas now, things like that, it's the human element, isn't it? So it's about who is the human and how do we support that human to thrive in the workplace. Bearing in mind that there are standards and, company brands, what we want to present outwards is really important. So, yeah,
I think
sorry, go on.
You probably articulated it better than I did on Judith's show. But I was just interested here. And funnily enough, with the dogs and children, I couldn't agree more. As we move into a more AI-driven world, a hyper-connected, digital, automated world, actually, we're going to cherish those human aspects of our lives more and more. We're going to realize how much we enjoy seeing what people have and how they handle their lives, because I think you can get a little bit siloed, and it can be very lonely when we automate too much. So there's a bit of me that kind of yearns for that.
It builds connection, doesn't it? If people can see who you are, and that you've got stuff in the background that maybe isn't what people expect, that's how you connect with people. But it's got to be in balance. You said the flamboyant self. Well, there's a time and place for that, isn't there? And
I would agree.
And there might not at work at that particular time might not be the right time or place.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And of course, it's worth being mindful of our own unconscious biases as well. If I was to turn up to a meeting or this podcast in a Bermuda shirt and whatever it is that we have, there might be thinking, actually, is Nick taking me seriously? And it's hard not to control the way our thoughts are going. So I think it's being mindful of others as well. It's not always about ourselves in that moment. So I really want to find out more about your book, Unshakable Confidence. It's a blueprint book. As I mentioned, it just came out at the end of September. It's on Amazon. I'm going to mention something for you, because I know that you gave your proceeds for the first week to a wonderful charity as well. So you do a lot of philanthropic things, and you're helping women into work, you're elevating women. Tell us a little bit about your book.
I wrote my book because it's basically my Unshakable Confidence program. And I wanted people to be able to access a kind of light version of what I do one-to-one with clients. Because this is what helped me when I lost my way and I lost myself. It's the program that I created to get myself back on track. So the blueprint is basically in the book. Each chapter takes you through the work you need to do for yourself. There are resources on a website that you get a password to access that will support you. So it's a book that is very much about doing the work, not just reading it. And it's something that I want people to go back to over and over again. I have clients who I buy them a journal when we first start working together. I have clients who are still going back to their journal from 4 years ago, which is all their notes. So this book is a bit of an upgrade on that. And even if we haven't worked together, you can, start to use that.
Of course, we know that a journal is one of the most powerful ways to know where we've come from. We can look back and realize where we are now to actually remove, as you say, you're linking it to confidence, remove that imposter syndrome, just sometimes go back and see how far you've come.
Acknowledge what you've done. If we're all moving so fast, we don't actually stop and think, hang on a minute, I've just done this. This is really good. We're off onto the next thing thinking, will I be able to do it? Just take a minute and acknowledge.
Yeah, when I work with clients, I always say, if you celebrated the success, it doesn't matter what it is. It can just be a high five at home, a glass of wine with your partner, whatever it is. Just put something, a flag in the sand to celebrate the moments, and be mindful that when you look back over a longer period, so 4 years is a great period, because we often overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year, but we'll underestimate what we can achieve in 4. And you look back and go, if I had no idea I'd be where I am now 4 years on. It's an incredible thing. Well, I recommend the book. For those interested, there will be a link in the show notes. You can actually find the link to that book on Amazon immediately and get yourself a copy. And as Kirsteen mentioned, there are resources. You'll get a code with the book. And if you go to elevate-women.co.uk, I think that's where the resources can be found. But even if you don't get the book, go to the website and you can find out lots of tools and resources, and Kirsteen's blog as well, all about how women can be elevated in the workplace. We're talking about confidence and a whole lot more. So please do look at those links. They're direct in the show notes. So I've got to quickly open the HR L&D vault. 3 short, sharp questions for you, Kirsteen. The first one is this. If you could give one universal piece of advice to HR professionals, what would it be?
Oh, God, keep having that people and commercial focus, both.
Perfect. A new question for the Vault today. I've shifted it up a little bit. How can HR professionals future-proof their careers as we face rapid changes in work culture and technology?
Okay, well, this is a little bit outside the box, but what I would encourage people to do is get themselves in a room with entrepreneurs. Go networking. And I know people in corporates don't generally do that. They stick in their industry. But if you go and sit with some entrepreneurs and listen to what they're doing, because they're often ahead of the curve, you are going to start to future-proof yourself. I remember talking to people in banks about AI a couple of years ago. They didn't know what I was talking about. And that's because my network was entrepreneurs.
That's great advice. Love that. And you know what? It links very nicely to the coaching concepts of focus on the who, not the how. It's the who gets us forward. It's the how that makes us freeze and procrastinate. And if you've got someone in your network that can help you over a problem, help you with your CV, help you overcome the anxiety of returning to work, knowing that someone else has been through that and can give you some guidance, some mentorship can be invaluable. So absolutely fantastic advice. Well, last question. From your experience, what common trait or behavior have you observed in all of the effective HR leaders or great leaders that you've worked with?
Curiosity, solution focused, and collaborative. They would be the top 3 for me.
3 for the price of 1. Brilliant. It's hard to argue with any of those. So just remind everyone, please do go to elevate-women.co.uk if you want to find out more about Kirsteen's work. There will be a link in there as well. I'm also going to put a link in the show notes to your very own confidence quiz. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, have a look in the show notes. There's a brilliant confidence quiz that Kirsteen's given to us exclusively to you guys to go and have a listen and have a check and find out where you sit on that scale. So do have a look at that. And I'll put a link to Kirsteen's LinkedIn profile for those that perhaps want to connect with Kirsteen directly, find out a little bit more what she does, or maybe even engage her services. You can do so directly through the notes of this show. Kirsteen, thank you ever so much for sharing your wisdom, your experiences. You've given, hopefully, not just the women that listen to this show, but everyone that listens, some really valuable insights, certainly on confidence, on leadership, on imposter syndrome, the importance of breaking down barriers in the workplace, and more. So thank you ever so much for your insights. And of course, all of our listeners, if you want to learn more about Kirsteen's work, please do go to those websites. Please do remember to review the show if you get a minute. And most importantly, share the episode with anyone you think might benefit from Kirsteen's content today. The more we can share the message, the more we can help elevate women in work and really help people that may be struggling with confidence or something else in their lives. So please do share the episode as well. I'd be very, very grateful. And of course, for anyone else who's listening to this show that needs support with an HR-related vacancy, please do get in touch with either myself or my wonderful team at jgarecruitment.com. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes. Just leaves me to say one huge final thank you to Kirsteen for joining me today on the show. I've enjoyed every second. I suspect we could talk for hours. Thank you ever so much. This episode is sponsored by Deel. That's Deel. Deel is your forever people platform built for global payroll and HR. So whether you're an enterprise business, a small company, or something in between, Deel works for your team. Hire and onboard talent in over 150 countries in minutes and run payroll in over 100 countries in just a few clicks. And with Deel's suite of AI-powered learning and development tools, you can even customize career roadmaps, performance assessments, and more. So are you ready to transform your global payroll and HR processes? If you are, click the link in the show notes to book a demo with Deel today. That's Deel.